My name is Clara, I'm 34, and at what was supposed to be a celebratory family dinner, my parents and sister announced she was moving into my house, without ever asking me. Before I tell you how I dropped a bomb that shattered not just their plans, but our entire family, let me know where you're watching from in the comments. It all started last Tuesday. The text from my mother, Brenda, had been oddly formal. Family dinner at our place. 7 p.m. sharp. Big news to celebrate. I should have known then. My family doesn't do formal. We're a pot roast and paper napkins kind of family. But when I walked in, the scent of roasted rosemary lamb filled the air. My father, Mark, was wearing a collared shirt on a Tuesday. And there, on the dining room table, was the good china, the set my mother saves for Thanksgiving and Christmas, gleaming under the chandelier. It felt wrong. A pit formed in my stomach, the same one I get when my younger sister, Chloe, has that particular look in her eye. The look that says, I've messed up again, and you're all going to have to fix it. She was seated at the head of the table, a place usually reserved for my father. She was glowing. My father popped a bottle of champagne, and filled crystal flutes I'd never seen before. A toast, he boomed, his face flush with a joy that hadn't reached his eyes. To new beginnings. Everyone raised their glass. I picked up my water, my hand trembling slightly. This wasn't a dinner. It was a stage. And I was the only one who hadn't been given the script. Chloe took a delicate sip of her champagne, her eyes flitting towards me before she smiled that sweet, weaponized smile of hers. So, she began, her voice as casual as if she were announcing she was switching to almond milk. I guess I'll be moving into your place next week, Clara. The words hung in the air, thick and heavy. My grip on my water glass tightened, my knuckles widening. I could feel my parents' eyes on me, expectant, waiting for me to play my part, to smile and congratulate her on what? On invading my life? I've already started packing, she continued, breezing past the suffocating silence. It shouldn't take more than a day to get everything moved in. Just until I figure things out. Figure things out. That was Chloe's lifelong motto. It was the reason my parents had been paying her rent for the 3rd time this year. It was the reason her car was in my father's name. I flashed back to 2 weeks ago, to the oversized plastic tubs stacked against the wall of my garage. Chloe's winter clothes. Chloe's books. When I'd texted her about them, she'd brushed it off. Just temporary storage, sis. My apartment is just too small. I should have known. Just like I should have known what it meant when Mom called me last week, her voice syrupy sweet. You must be so lonely in that big house all by yourself, honey. You need your sister's company. It was an ambush. A coordinated, perfectly executed ambush. And I was the target. My mother reached across the table and patted my hand. Her touch felt like a brand. Isn't it wonderful, Clara? We were so worried about Chloe, and this is the perfect solution. It's perfect timing. Perfect timing. As if my life, the one I had built penny by painful penny, working overtime until my eyes burned, sacrificing vacations and new clothes to afford the down payment on my dream home, my quiet, peaceful sanctuary, was just a resource to be redirected to Chloe's latest crisis. Why do you look so serious? Chloe laughed, a high, nervous sound. This is good news. You get company, and I get to save on rent for a while. It's a win-win. My father raised his glass again, his voice booming to fill the space my shock had created. To family. Helping each other, no matter what. Everyone lifted their glass in response. Everyone except me. The clinking of crystal felt like a countdown. They all watched me, their smiles starting to falter, the united front forming against the daughter who wasn't following the script. My mother's smile tightened. Clara. Don't be difficult. Difficult. Selfish. Uncaring. I could feel the familiar labels hovering in the air, ready to be slapped on me the moment I disagreed. But something inside me, something that had been dormant for years, finally snapped. The trembling in my hands stopped. It was replaced by a cold, hard clarity. I carefully set my water glass down on the table. The small click echoed in the sudden silence. My eyes met Chloe's, then my mother's, then my father's. I held their expectant gazes, letting the silence stretch until it was uncomfortable, until I could see the irritation creeping into their expressions. Then, my hand moved from the table, slowly, deliberately, and reached down for the purse resting on the floor beside me. My fingers closed around the familiar shape of the manila envelope I'd brought with me. I'd almost left it in the car, thinking tonight wasn't the right time, that it would be too confrontational, too dramatic. But there is no right time with my family. There is only their time, their plans, their expectations. The tremor in my hands that had been there all evening steadied, replaced by an icy resolve. My mother's smile faltered, her eyes narrowing slightly as I placed the envelope on the gleaming mahogany table. "Clara, what's that?" "We're having a celebration." Her tone carried a clear warning. "Don't ruin this. Don't be difficult." "Actually," I said, my voice calmer than I'd felt in years. "I have news, too." My father lowered his champagne glass, his forehead creasing. "What kind of news?" I didn't answer immediately. Instead, I slowly unclasped the metal fastener on the envelope, the soft scratch sound cutting through the tension. I pulled out a thick stack of papers, clipped together. The top page was stark and official, the bold, black letters shouting from across the table, "Purchase and Sale Agreement." I slid the stack to the center of the table, turning it so the heading faced my father. "This," I said, finally meeting his eyes, "is the sale agreement for my house." Silence. A thick, absolute silence that seemed to suck all the air out of the room. My mother's mouth opened, then closed again. Chloe just stared, her face a mask of disbelief. I let the moment hang, letting the reality of those words sink in. "I accepted an offer last week. The closing is in 30 days. That's when it happened." Chloe's champagne flute, the one she'd been holding so proudly just moments before, slipped from her numb fingers. It didn't just drop, it felt like it fell in slow motion, tumbling end over end before it hit the hardwood floor with a sickeningly loud shatter. The sound echoed in the silent room, but no one moved. The shards of crystal lay there, sparkling amidst a puddle of champagne, a perfect metaphor for their shattered plans. "You, what?" Chloe finally whispered, her voice barely audible. Her eyes were wide, fixed on the papers on the table as if they were a venomous snake. "Interesting timing, isn't it?" I said, my voice still even. I picked up my phone, my fingers moving quickly across the screen. I'd found it this morning, a little piece of digital evidence that confirmed every suspicion I'd had. "While you were all planning for Chloe to move in, it seems Mom and my dear aunt were already getting a head start on the interior decorating." I turned the screen toward them. On it was a brightly curated Pinterest board. There were pictures of soft gray paint colors, bohemian-style throw pillows, and minimalist bookshelves. And at the very top, in a cheerful, cursive font, was the title of the board, created by my mother's account, "Chloe's New Room." The flicker of recognition, of pure, unadulterated guilt, that flashed across my mother's face was all the confirmation I needed. My father just stared, his jaw slack, looking like a fish suddenly finding itself on dry land. 9 years. 9 years of saving every possible penny, of working overtime on projects I hated, of sacrificing vacations and new clothes, all for that house. My dream. My accomplishment. And to them, it was just another resource to be redirected to Chloe. The shock in the room was palpable, a physical force. They had walked in here tonight expecting me to roll over, to accept my role as the family doormat. They had expected tears, maybe some weak protests, but ultimately, my compliance. They never, in a million years, expected me to have a plan of my own. The stunned silence finally broke, not with an apology, but with a tidal wave of indignation. My father was the first to recover, standing up so abruptly his chair scraped loudly against the floor. He waved a dismissive hand at the sale agreement on the table. "You can just cancel the sale," he said, his voice hardening into the familiar tone of paternal command he used when he expected to be obeyed without question. "These things have cooling-off periods. It's a simple phone call, Clara. A simple phone call." As if a legally binding contract was a dinner reservation. My mother rose too, placing a placating hand on his arm, her expression shifting from shock to a mask of deep, theatrical concern. "Clara, honey," she said, her voice dropping into the soft, worried tone she used when discussing unstable people. "We already promised Chloe. We promised her she could stay with you as long as she needed. You can't possibly expect her to find a place in just 30 days. That's cruel. Cruel." The word landed like a physical blow. My boundaries, my decisions about my own life and property, were being recast as cruelty. Then came Chloe, her face streaked with tears that seemed to appear on command. "You did this on purpose," she accused, her voice rising to a hysterical pitch. "You found out I needed a place to stay and you sold your beautiful house just to spite me. How could you be so selfish?" Selfish. There it was. The second of the twin labels they always used to keep me in line. Cruel and selfish. If I didn't give them what they wanted, I was cruel. If I wanted something for myself, I was selfish. For a moment, a desperate, foolish part of me considered explaining the truth. The catastrophic roof replacement that had drained my savings. The waterline break that followed. The heating system failure that was the final nail in the coffin. The mounting financial pressure that had made selling not just a choice, but an absolute necessity. But what would be the point? They didn't want explanations. They wanted compliance. My financial struggles would just be twisted into more proof of my incompetence, another reason I needed their guidance. Why give them more ammunition? "I made this decision for my own reasons," I said instead, my voice a low, steady anchor in the storm of their accusations. "And it's final." "So you're just going to leave your sister homeless?" my mother cried, her voice escalating. "After everything we've done for you?" The invisible ledger of family obligation. It only ever seemed to accumulate in one direction. I felt the familiar weight of guilt settle on my shoulders, a heavy cloak I'd worn my entire life. But this time, it felt different. Thinner. Less convincing. I looked at Susan, my mother's oldest friend, who had been sitting in uncomfortable silence through the entire ordeal, staring fixedly at her plate of cooling lamb. She was a kind, quiet woman who had known me since I was a child. In all the chaos, I hadn't even thought about how this must look to an outsider. As my father launched into another tirade about family loyalty and how I was single-handedly destroying it, I felt a gentle pressure on my hand under the table. I glanced down. It was Susan's hand, her warm fingers giving mine a firm, reassuring squeeze. Our eyes met for a fraction of a second across the table, and in her gaze, I saw not pity, but a profound and unmistakable understanding. A silent message passed between us: "You are not crazy. You are not wrong." That small, simple gesture was a lifeline. It was a pinprick of light in the suffocating darkness of their manipulation. One person in this room didn't see me as selfish or cruel for protecting myself. One person saw the truth. Susan's quiet validation was a lifeline in that storm of accusation. It was the first sign that I wasn't alone in seeing the truth. If you're still listening, please help me by liking this video and commenting with the number 1 below, so I know you've given me a like, and I understand that you're with me on this journey. Your support is a huge encouragement for me. Please, comment with the number 1, and then continue listening to my story. The ambush at the dinner table was just the opening battle. The war began the next day. The first call came before I'd even finished my morning coffee. It was my Aunt Sarah. "Clara, honey, I just talked to your mother," she said, her voice dripping with the funereal tone reserved for family scandals. "Is it true?" Did you really sell your house just to keep poor Chloe from staying with you? My coffee sloshed over the rim of my mug, scalding my fingers. The physical burn was nothing compared to the hot flash of rage that crawled up my neck. That's not what happened, Aunt Sarah. Your sister will be homeless, Clara. I never thought you could be so cruel. Click. The calls continued all day. Uncle Robert. Cousin Jennifer. Even my father's golf buddy, Chuck, whose connection to this situation was a complete mystery to me. Each conversation was a carbon copy of the last, a script written by Chloe and distributed by my mother. Clara's heartlessness. Chloe's desperation. Our profound disappointment. That evening, I made the mistake of checking Facebook. It was the first thing on my feed. A new post from Chloe, published an hour ago. There was no picture, just a block of text. The hardest lesson in life is learning who truly has your back when times get tough. Family should be forever, not just when it's convenient. Feeling heartbroken. 27 sympathetic comments blossomed below it like poison mushrooms. And there, right at the top, was a comment from my mother, "We're here for you, sweetheart. Always." The hypocrisy felt like a punch to the gut. The knife in my hand chopped carrots with increasing force, the rhythmic thump, 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 a poor substitute for the screaming I wanted to do. But the final blow, the act that showed me just how low my sister was willing to go, came on Thursday. My manager, Linda, a kind woman in her late 50s, asked me to step into her office. Her expression was pinched with concern. She closed the door behind us. "Clara, I received an unusual email last night," she said, turning her monitor toward me. "I want you to see it because I trust you, and I feel you have a right to know." It was from an anonymous email address. The subject line read, "Concern about your employee, Clara Miller." My blood ran cold as I read the words. It spoke of my recent erratic and impulsive behavior. It hinted at my severe financial desperation. It suggested that I was becoming unreliable and that my personal problems were starting to affect my work. It was a character assassination, designed to plant a seed of doubt, to jeopardize the very salary I was fighting to protect. I just stared at the screen, the words blurring. This wasn't just a family squabble anymore. This was a deliberate attempt to sabotage my life. That night, I didn't cry. I was past tears. I sat at my dining room table, surrounded by boxes, and for the first time, I allowed myself to remember the whole truth of it. It started with the March storms. The ones that had peeled shingles off the roof like a sunburn. The leak started in the attic, a slow drip 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 that soon became a dark, spreading stain on my bedroom ceiling. The verdict from the roofer was catastrophic. The entire roof needed to be replaced. $11,000. My emergency fund, which I had so proudly built, was gone in a single transaction. Then came April. I woke up one morning to a swamp in my front yard and the sound of gushing water. The main water line from the street to my house had burst. Another emergency call. Another crew of men digging muddy trenches across the lawn I had so carefully tended. $8,000. I canceled the vacation I had planned to visit my college roommate in Arizona. I started eating ramen for dinner more nights than I care to admit. The final blow came in June, during the first heat wave of the summer. The air conditioner sputtered, groaned, and died. The technician who came out delivered the news with a grim look. The entire heating and cooling system was shot. It was original to the house, 25 years old. The replacement would be $5,000. That was the money I simply didn't have. That was the night the panic attack started. I'd sit at this very table, surrounded by spreadsheets and bank statements, the numbers refusing to balance no matter how many times I recalculated. I'd wake up at 3 a.m., my heart pounding, the weight of the house, my beautiful dream house, pressing down on me until I couldn't breathe. I started losing weight. My pants began slipping at the waist, so I punched new holes in my belt rather than buy smaller sizes. It was a temporary situation, I told myself. It needed a temporary solution. Selling wasn't a choice made out of spite. It was the only choice I had left. It was a desperate act of self-preservation. And my family, in their blind entitlement, had just declared war on a survivor. They had no idea how hard I was willing to fight. The anonymous email was a declaration of war, and it changed everything. The hurt and betrayal I felt quickly hardened into something else, a cold, clear-eyed strategy. My family had their alliance, built on years of shared narratives and convenient fictions. It was time for me to build mine, one built on facts. I spent the entire weekend not just packing, but preparing my case. I transformed my dining room table into a war room. I printed out every single document. The bank statements showing the withdrawal that gutted my emergency fund. The contractor invoices, each one a paper testament to a financial disaster. The credit card statements showing the small loan I had to take out just to cover the last of the furnace repair. I arranged them in chronological order, a timeline of my silent struggle. It was a fortress of paper proof against the siege of their fiction. When I was done, I knew I couldn't do this alone. They would shout me down. They would twist my words. I needed objective voices. I needed people who weren't trapped in the family mythology. I made 3 phone calls. My first was to David, my financial advisor. He was a sharp, no-nonsense man who had helped me with my mortgage 9 years ago. David, I said, my voice steady. I'm not calling for advice. I need to hire you for an hour of your time. I'm holding a family meeting, and I need an expert witness. I need you to look at my financials and explain, in clinical terms, what financial ruin looks like and why selling my house was the only responsible decision. There was a pause on the other end. Clara, he said finally, tell me when and where. I'll be there. No charge. My second call was to my colleague, Kevin. He was a quiet guy from the marketing department, but a few months ago, over coffee, he'd told me a heartbreaking story about his older brother, who had been enabled by their parents his entire life and was now in his 40s, completely unable to function as an adult. Kevin, I said, I know this is a huge ask, but you told me once that the kindest thing is sometimes to stop rescuing someone. I need someone in a room full of rescuers to hear that. I need you to tell your brother's story. He didn't hesitate. I'll be there, he said. My third call was the hardest. It was to my Uncle Ben, my father's younger brother. He was the black sheep of the family, a gruff, retired history professor who valued facts above all else. He and my father had a strained relationship, mostly because Uncle Ben refused to play along with the family drama. Uncle Ben, I started, my heart pounding. I know this is putting you in a difficult position. But you've always taught me that history is written by the victors, and that the truth is often buried. My family is trying to bury me right now. I took a deep breath. I'm going to present the truth next Tuesday evening. I'm not asking you to take my side. I'm just asking you to be there to witness it. There was a long silence on the other end of the line. I heard him sigh, a weary sound. Your father has always chosen the easier path, Clara, he said, his voice raspy. It takes courage to choose the harder one. Tuesday at 7, you said? With my team assembled, I sent one final text. A group message to my parents, Chloe, and Uncle Ben. It was short and to the point. We need to have a final family meeting to discuss the house and Chloe's situation. My house. Tuesday at 7 p.m. It is very important that you are all there. I didn't ask. I told them. The power dynamic had already begun to shift. They were no longer summoning me for an intervention. I was summoning them for a reckoning. Tuesday evening at exactly 7 o'clock, the doorbell rang. When I opened it, it wasn't just my parents and Chloe. They'd brought reinforcements. My Aunt Sarah and Uncle Robert stood behind them, their faces grim and judgmental. It was a family firing squad, assembled for an execution. "Come in," I said, my voice even. I stepped back and let them file into my half-packed living room, their eyes taking in the stacks of boxes with disapproval. Their expressions changed when they entered the dining room. Sitting calmly at the table were my own reinforcements. David, my financial advisor, in a crisp suit, looking like a lawyer ready for court. Kevin, my colleague, giving them a polite but firm nod. And sitting in the chair next to mine, my Uncle Ben, who simply looked at his brother, my father, over the rim of his glasses. The air crackled with tension. My mother's face tightened when she saw Susan was there too, sitting quietly by the window. "Susan, what are you doing here?" she snapped. "This is a private family matter." "Brenda, you invited me to the last private family matter," Susan replied, her voice gentle but unyielding. "I'm here to support Clara." I stood at the head of my dining room table, a position that felt foreign yet right. The manila folder in my hands felt like a shield. "Please, have a seat," I said. They hesitated, then reluctantly sat down opposite my team, the table feeling like a battle line drawn between us. "Before anyone says another word," I began, my voice carrying a steadiness that I didn't entirely recognize, "I need you all to see something." I opened the folder. I didn't speak of betrayal or feelings. I spoke of facts. I took out the first invoice and slid it across the polished surface of the table toward my father. The paper made a soft shushing sound. "This is the roof replacement from last March," I said, my eyes locked on his. The 30-year shingles only lasted 22. Insurance covered nothing. That was $11,200. I pointed to the circled total at the bottom. Uncle Ben leaned forward, adjusting his glasses. My father just stared at it, his face unreadable. I slid the second invoice out. "This is the waterline repair from April. $8,200. The city updated the main line on our street, and the pressure surge revealed that my connection was deteriorating." There was no warning. My mother shifted uncomfortably in her seat but remained silent. "And this," I said, placing the third major bill on top of the others, was the heating system replacement in June. $5,000. The final blow. I paused, letting the numbers sink in. A total of over $24,000 in unexpected, unavoidable repairs in less than 4 months. Finally, I placed my latest bank statement on top of the pile. "My emergency fund is gone," I said, my voice quiet but clear. "My savings are gone. I was 2 months away from having to take out a high-interest loan just to pay my mortgage. My financial advisor, David, recommended selling while the market was still strong, rather than risking a forced sale or foreclosure later when I might be underwater." Chloe's chair scraped against the floor as she stood abruptly. "This is just creative accounting, Clara," she accused, her voice dripping with the familiar scorn. "You've always been good with numbers when it suits you. You're just trying to get out of your family responsibilities." Before I could even respond, Uncle Ben surprised me by turning toward my sister. His voice was calm, analytical, like a professor addressing a student who hadn't done the reading. "Chloe," he asked, "what is your current employment situation? Last I heard, you were between jobs." The unexpected redirection left Chloe fumbling. "I'm exploring opportunities," she stammered. "The job market is complicated right now." My mother jumped into her defense. "Ben, this isn't about employment. Family duty exists regardless of finances." That's when David cleared his throat. He spoke with the cool authority of an expert. "Actually," he said, addressing my parents directly, "enabling financial dependency ultimately harms both parties. The giver depletes their resources, while the receiver never develops crucial life skills or the resilience to handle adversity." Then Kevin leaned forward. He spoke softly, but everyone strained to hear him. "My older brother lived with my parents until he was 42, he said, his eyes on my father. They paid his bills, they made his appointments, they solved all his problems because they loved him. When they passed away 2 years ago, he had no idea how to function. He lost their house, the house he grew up in, within a year because he never learned how to manage money or pay a mortgage. He paused, his gaze unflinching. Sometimes the most loving thing you can do for someone is to stop rescuing them. The room fell unusually quiet. These outside perspectives, logical, financial, personal, had penetrated the family mythology we had operated under for decades. It was as if someone had finally opened a window in a stuffy, airless room. Chloe, seeing her narrative crumbling and her rescuers being challenged, grabbed her purse. "This is ridiculous," she hissed, her face contorted with rage. "You're all acting like I'm some kind of parasite." When no one leaped to her defense, not even my mother, she stormed toward the door. Eden has always been the golden child with her perfect house and perfect job while everyone ignores how hard things have been for me. The door slammed behind her, the sound echoing through the house. In the ringing silence, my father stared at the hardwood floor. My mother's rigid posture had softened, her hands resting open on the table instead of clenched in her lap. For the first time in a family confrontation, I wasn't the one left feeling like I had done something wrong. The weight on my shoulders wasn't guilt anymore. It was the solid, reassuring weight of the truth. A week after the disastrous meeting, my doorbell rang. It was them again, my parents and Chloe, standing on my porch like a delegation preparing for a tense negotiation. There were no reinforcements this time. Chloe wouldn't meet my eyes. My father had a practiced, cheerful smile plastered on his face that didn't reach his eyes. "We've been talking," my mother began as they stepped inside, not waiting for an invitation. "And we think we've found the perfect solution. A compromise." They arranged themselves on my couch, the only piece of furniture not yet swathed in moving blankets, while I remained standing. The power dynamic wasn't lost on me. "We know selling the house is your decision, and we respect that," my father said, his voice carrying that false heartiness he used for difficult conversations. "But instead of Chloe moving in with you, what if you helped her get her own place?" I waited, saying nothing. My mother leaned forward, her voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. "Just a small loan, honey. To help her with the first and last month's rent, and the security deposit. With the money you're making from the sale, a little loan to get her started would hardly affect you." "Unlike me," Chloe interjected, her voice soft and rehearsed. "Some people just have bad luck, you know?" The implication hung heavy in the air. "You're successful. She's struggling. You owe her this." I didn't argue. I didn't get angry. I walked over to the coffee table where I had placed another manila folder. They watched me, confusion replacing their certainty. "I can't give Chloe a loan," I said calmly, pulling out a document. "Because most of the profit from this sale is going directly toward the down payment on my new home." I handed the paper to my father. It was the pre-approval letter for a small townhouse in the short north. My new monthly payment will be nearly 40% less than my current mortgage. Selling this house was never about a big payday. It's about rebuilding my emergency savings. It's about reducing my financial stress. It's about finally prioritizing my own financial health. My father's eyes widened as he scanned the numbers on the page. For once, he was speechless. "I can't support Chloe financially," I continued, my voice firm but not unkind. "But I can help her learn to support herself." I pulled a business card from my pocket and held it out to Chloe. She stared at it as if it were a scorpion. "Our marketing department has an entry-level position opening up next week. The starting salary would be more than enough to cover rent on a nice one-bedroom apartment in the city. I spoke to HR. They're willing to give you an interview." This, finally, seemed to genuinely stun her. Her mouth opened, then closed. "This isn't charity," I added. "It's an opportunity. You'd have to earn it. The choice is yours." Before she could answer, I turned back to the folder. And as for the idea of another loan, I pulled out the final piece of paper. It was a spreadsheet. I placed it on the coffee table in front of my parents. It was an itemized list I had compiled from memory, from years of overhearing their private conversations. Car payments, rent supplements, credit card bailouts, student loan payments they had helped with. I had been conservative with my estimates. The total at the bottom, circled in a thick, bright red marker, was $52,750. My mother gasped, her hand flying to her mouth. My father picked up the paper, his forehead creasing as he studied the numbers, as if seeing them all in one place for the first time. "This isn't love," I said quietly, the words coming from a place deep inside me. "It's dependence. And it's hurting all of us. It's certainly not preparing her for a promotion or a stable future." I looked at my dad. "You taught me that once, remember? When I wanted to quit college my freshman year because calculus was too hard? You refused to let me move back home. You told me, we're doing you no favors by making life too easy. You insisted I find a tutor and figure it out." I held his gaze. Strange how principles change when they're applied to different daughters. The silence that followed was absolute. Finally, my father put his arm around my mother's shoulders. "We should go," he said quietly. They walked to the door, my mother not quite meeting my eyes. Chloe hesitated, her gaze flicking from me to the business card still sitting on the coffee table where I'd placed it. "I don't need your charity job," she said, but there was less conviction in her voice than usual. "It's not charity," I repeated. "It's an opportunity." She turned away, but as she followed my parents out the door, I saw it. A quick, furtive movement. When she thought I wasn't looking, she snatched the business card off the table and slipped it into her purse. 3 months later, I was standing in the center of my new townhouse in the short north, savoring the feeling of the afternoon sun warming the hardwood floors beneath my feet. The space was smaller than my old house, but it felt lighter, freer. The crushing weight of the mortgage, the constant fear of the next thing that would break, it was gone. My new reality was quiet. It was peaceful. My relationship with my parents had changed. It hadn't magically healed. There was no tearful movie-ending reconciliation. It was strained. We had Sunday dinners again, but the dynamic was different. The conversation was polite, shallow. They would ask about my new photography class, and I would ask about their garden. They stopped talking about Chloe's problems in front of me. They stopped comparing us. The enabling had stopped, but it had been replaced by a careful, awkward distance. They treated me with a new, grudging respect, but the old, easy warmth was gone. I grieved for it sometimes, but then I remembered the price of that warmth had been my own well-being. It was a price I was no longer willing to pay. Chloe, to my absolute shock, had actually called HR. She got the interview, and she got the job. She wasn't a star employee, not yet. She complained about her boss, about waking up early, about her entry-level salary. But she was doing it. A month ago, she had texted me, of all people. "Can you show me how you do that budget thing?" So we sat at my new kitchen island, surrounded by her bank statements and calculator apps. I showed her how to track her spending, how to allocate a percentage for rent, for utilities, for savings. I watched as she chewed on her lip, running the numbers again and again. "So if I put away 15% of each paycheck," she'd murmured, mostly to herself, "I could have my own security deposit by January." I saw a flicker of determination in her eyes that I had never seen before. Our relationship wasn't fixed. We weren't braiding each other's hair. But it was the first honest, real interaction we had shared in our adult lives. Tonight, my home was filled with a different kind of warmth. The easy laughter of my chosen family. Susan was here, her presence a calm, steady comfort. David, my financial advisor, was debating football with Kevin, my colleague. And in the armchair by the window, sipping a glass of iced tea, was my Uncle Ben. This was my housewarming party. This was my new beginning. Susan raised her wineglass. A toast, she said, her eyes twinkling as she looked at me. To homes that shelter us, and boundaries that protect us. Everyone clinked glasses. Later, as people were leaving, Uncle Ben pulled me aside. "You know," he said, his voice gruff, "your father called me after that meeting. He was angry. Not at you, I don't think. He was angry at himself. He said, I thought I was being a good father." He shook his head. "It'll take time, Clara. Decades of habit are hard to break. But you did the right thing. For everyone." After they had all gone, I stood by the large window overlooking the quiet city street. In my hands, I held a framed photo Kevin had given me as a gift. It was a picture of me, taken by the realtor 9 years ago, standing on the porch of my old house, keys clutched in my hand, a smile on my face so wide it threatened to split my face. The woman in that photo had no idea what was coming. She didn't know the struggle, the heartache, the betrayal. But she also didn't know her own strength. I had lost the family I thought I had, the one built on a fragile foundation of obligation and unspoken rules. But I had survived. And in the quiet, sun-filled space of my new life, I was finally, truly, home. Thank you so much for listening to my story all the way to the end. It means the world to me. I have one question for all of you who have been through something similar: how do you find the balance between helping family and protecting your own peace? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. And if my story resonated with you, please consider liking this video and subscribing for more.